In Revenge of the Sith, as Mace Windu entered Palpatine's office on Coruscant to place the Supreme Chancellor under arrest in the name of the Galactic Senate, Palpatine reminded the Jedi Master that it was he who was the Senate. During the course of the Clone War, and even prior to it, Palpatine slowly acquired more and more legal authority, taking it away from the Senate and giving it to himself as Supreme Chancellor. But just how much political power did Palpatine have by the time of his attempted arrest by the Jedi in the final days of the war? And was he truly, in fact, the Senate? In this video expose, I will explain the political power that Palpatine was able to acquire during the Clone War and how he was able to acquire it. Prior to Palpatine's chancellorship, the Supreme Chancellor of the Republic was a relatively powerless position, due to the recent reformations that were passed roughly 1,000 years before the events of A New Hope. After the reformations, power that had been granted to the Chancellor to fight the new Sith Wars was taken away from the office and reinvested back into the Galactic Senate. As true political power was found within the senatorial body, the Chancellor primarily served a symbolic role as officiator of parliamentary procedure, and was viewed as the first among equals within the Senate. Therefore, for roughly a millennium before the outbreak of the Clone War, the Supreme Chancellor retained little power in comparison to the Galactic Senate. So how was this changed by Palpatine? Although Palpatine would take away the power enjoyed by the Galactic Senate and give it to himself as Chancellor during the Clone War, his campaign to make himself the Senate, in many ways, started prior to the war. 2 years before the outbreak of the galaxy-wide conflict, as the Separatist crisis was reaching its apex, the Senate passed an amendment to the Galactic Constitution known as the Emergency Powers Act. The act unraveled the political conventions of the Republic that had been established over the previous 1,000 years, by ending the 4-year term limit that was placed upon the Supreme Chancellor and the election of a new Chancellor by the Senate. Following the Emergency Powers Act, Palpatine could remain as Chancellor until he decided to call for new elections, in effect making him Chancellor for life. But more than that, the act also severely limited senatorial oversight on the chancellorship, as Palpatine was granted powers to make decisions without the need for Senate approval and authority, in an attempt to bring the Separatist crisis to an end. Therefore, even before the Clone War, Palpatine had in effect made himself Chancellor for life, and had limited abilities to make decisions without any debate or oversight from the Senate, thereby positioning himself to erode even more of the Senate's power during the war. With the start of the Clone War, Palpatine was able to acquire more and more political power for himself. With the climate of fear and panic caused by the war, in addition to alliances made with senators who were happy to go along with his machinations for power, many of the steps taken by Palpatine were relatively easy. The first piece of legislation of note is the Enhanced Security and Enforcement Act, or Security Enforcement Act. Approved by the Senate during the war, the Security Enforcement Act again amended the Galactic Constitution to erode the balance of power that had existed since the recent reformations. The act transferred several powers from the Galactic Senate to the Supreme Chancellor, such as giving Palpatine the sole authority to conduct searches and seizures on Republic citizens, and granting the Chancellor sole discretion of many other important legal authorities. By the time the Security Enforcement Act was passed in the first year of the war, the Jedi Order started to look upon the actions of Palpatine suspiciously, as although the legislation was being passed by the Senate, the result was nonetheless eroding senatorial power and oversight to the benefit of Palpatine. Following the Enhanced Security and Enforcement Act, in still only the first year of the war, the Senate passed Emergency Amendment 121B, also known as the Reflex Amendment. The Reflex Amendment was one of the most important wartime usurpations of senatorial power by Palpatine. The amendment allowed Palpatine to react to any battles that were being conducted by the Republic without any consultation or oversight from the Senate. Although the language seemed relatively harmless, as the amendment promised to merely allow for more efficient government, the Reflex Amendment gave tremendous control over the Grand Army to Palpatine. Further, in addition to the purely increased military control it provided, The amendment also allowed Palpatine to directly interfere in local sector and planetary governments, thereby setting the stage for greater dictatorial powers to come. Without question, if we wanted to give a point in time to declare that Palpatine had truly become the Senate, having taken its power for himself, it would be in the days following the shocking and bloody Battle of Coruscant. Benefiting from Grievous's surprise attack on the Republic capital, the Senate strongly supported and passed the Security Act Amendment, which amended the Enhanced Security and Enforcement Act. The Security Act Amendment put Palpatine in direct command of the Grand Army of the Republic, removing all remaining senatorial oversight of the military, and bestowing upon Palpatine the title of Supreme Commander of the Republic Armed Forces. In taking away the Senate's jurisdiction over the armed forces, which it had enjoyed for the entirety of the war up to that point, Palpatine made himself the military leader of the Republic. With the passing of the Security Act Amendment, Palpatine gave himself direct control over the armed forces, and eroded any ability of the Senate to interfere with his military commands. Further, the amendment also took command of the Jedi High Council away from the Senate and gave it to Palpatine, thereby allowing the Sith Lord to command the Jedi Order as he wished, and even to disband it. But while the Security Act Amendment was important for its placing both the Grand Army and the Jedi Order under the command of Palpatine, and removing any interference from the Senate was truly made powerless and obsolete through a proclamation passed by Palpatine, made possible by his previously acquired powers, called the Sector Governance Decree. The decree, passed in the final days of the Clone War, set up a parallel governmental system that didn't just rival the Senate's power, but operated to strip the Senate of any and all remaining power it enjoyed, and terminated its authority. The Sector Governance Decree established a system of governors who reported directly to Palpatine, with no senatorial oversight. These governors were given the task of overseeing the military operations that were conducted within their assigned sector, which naturally extended into the political sphere of operations as well. Recognizing that the Senate and its representatives were powerless within this new order established by Palpatine, several senators did what they could to oppose the Chancellor through the Petition of 2000. But by then it was too late. Palpatine was in direct command of the Republic's military through the Security Act Amendment, and erased all political power held by the Senate through the Sector Governance Decree. Therefore, by the time Mace and the Jedi attempted to arrest Palpatine after discovering his true identity as a Sith Lord, Palpatine was correct and truly was the Senate, having slowly eroded the entirety of the Senate's political and military authority and acquiring them for himself. So there we have it, how Palpatine truly was the Senate. We love making these videos, so why not subscribe for more fun Star Wars theories and discussions? Also, if you enjoyed the video, think about giving a like or leaving a comment. If not for me... For what were you all thinking?